Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
I am glad to hear that. You're in an
So
interesting looking place there.
I am,
Now,
and
I'm not sure I'm going to guess where this is. It looks vaguely like an Italian town up in the Apennines or something. How far off am I?
uh, I'm going to go at least 1,000 miles off,
Okay.
but not terribly. It's the middle of Turkey. It's a town called
Turkey.
Cappadocia.
Cappadocia. All right.
Do you know the town, Deirdre?
I know the town, and interesting that the architecture is very much, it's probably old architecture. That's one of the old towns there,
Yeah,
that the architecture is very much like what you would find in an Italian city or a Greek city or, of
yeah.
that vintage, but very nice.
Really interesting, though, huh?
Yes.
Very interesting place. I'm glad, again, you disappointed my one of our biggest fans, my sister. Uh,
By not guessing it immediately, but
and
I'll
my
get
guess
back on
is
track here.
right now, she's on her way to Barcelona. She's going to go there for her birthday. So her son lives there. One of her
Very
sons lives
nice.
there, which we both know is an incredible place to live. So,
Incredible place. Yes.
so we're talking about, we're actually catching up on cleaning up from questions we are asked by our watchers of these videos. They've come back and asked us to come back and asked, okay. You can see what kind of morning I'm having. I have way too much coffee in me for this time of day, dude. I really do, as you know, from the work we've done already this morning. But we've had a number of questions that people ask us to slow down a bit on a few of these topics to refresh their memory, because we just keep charging ahead, and sometimes we don't clean up enough. So with that, I'll turn it over to you to give the introduction to what we're talking about today.
All right, we're talking about AI, obviously. And as Tom says, people have said that we just charge right through these topics because we know them so well. We've been working with them for a couple of years now. But we decided to slow down on three particular topics to go into them in more depth because these are actually important concepts. The first is addressing the question of whether generative AI models are tools versus machines. And we'll explain why this is actually a very important distinction and how this affects their use by people and in businesses. The second one, and this will be our next podcast, is so what is this AI insight layer you keep talking about? Which really means what does it mean to work horizontally in an organization and not vertically within a function? Another very important topic having to do with the value that these generative AI models bring to business. And then the third topic is so, what does an organization look like when it's using these models? You keep encouraging me to develop an AI forward business. What does that even mean? We'll spend a whole podcast on that one as well. But let's start right now with the whole distinction between tools and the machine and why the distinctions matters. Now, people tend to use the term AI generally. Well, it can mean many different things. It covers anything from automation in the back office to robots in a manufacturing plant. Sometimes it can refer to machine learning capabilities, which, as we know, are simply very focused on one data function or task. And then humans have to step in and do the real data analytics. And these have been good uses of various forms of AI for businesses. They're getting value out of them. But these are all tool uses. We're defining a tool, excuse me, as AI. Excuse me, I have workers in my house and they're generating a level of dust. So,
And here you thought the biggest issue was going to be the sound.
yeah, very much so. But these uses fall in the category of tool, which with each of these uses accomplishing really just one task or simple function. Humans are using these tools to facilitate defined work or to increase productivity. And humans expect these tools to accomplish just one type of defined work. That's a tool. You pick up a hammer, you do one thing with the hammer. You use a can opener, you do one thing with your can opener tools. Now, over the past 3 years, a new type of AI has been developed, and that's these generative AI models. Now, these models have been programmed to perform certain work, but they've also been programmed to give users the capabilities to accomplish a range of things. And this moves them beyond tools. They are now machines when used as machines. And that's an important point. You and I say that people are using these models mostly as tools, one defined function, instead of the machines they could be. But when these machines are used by humans interacting with the machines in prompts, and we would point people to our 5-step process for this interaction between humans and machines, in this human and machine partnership we talk about, you're driving activity that creates new functionality and new paths. The AI is becoming a machine. And this means that it has a capability that can move in multiple directions. So, in this age of intelligence, AI can be either a tool or a machine. And organizations get um, great use from both of these. We don't want to discourage the use of AI as tools. But once you start using AI as a machine, you get into strategic uses, which is a whole new ball game. Tools execute, machines provide capabilities that allow new strategies and new initiatives. And it's my personal feeling, by the way, that because most people still think of generative AI models as tools, after all, you just set up an account, you link to it, you do your certain thing, and so forth, that they're finding it easy to overlook the machine capabilities. They find themselves working with the models just as tools. And we'll talk more about this. So, the rest of this podcast is going to talk about this distinction, whether you're using AI as a tool or as a machine. Now, Tom, I'm going to stop here and let you chime in on this topic.
So you're probably not going to like this, Deirdre, so please just bear with me. But I have been called both a tool and a machine. Now, and if you need any knowledge about distinctions, just think about it that way. That what do they say when they call somebody a tool? When you do that, what you mean is they're controlled by others, right? Because they'll just do one thing. But when you say someone's a machine, that means that you just point them in the direction and they'll get it done. So I know it's really raw and it's probably not a the most sophisticated analogy we can give. But when you get confused about this, that's what we're talking about. And so even if you say, well, I'm implementing agentic AI, you still could be implementing it as a tool because you still could be implementing it that same way. Just tell it what to do and it'll do it. And probably so there's two things wrong with not two things wrong. Two things happen when you have this issue. One is not understanding what the machine is or the tool is trying to be, right? So what a frustration you can have is you expect something to be a tool and it's not, it's a machine. Or you expect it to be a machine and it's actually just a tool. And nothing can be more frustrating to a human than to operate that way. And we've all seen this, and I won't use names, but there are applications where they're desperately trying to become a machine, but they really, all we want them for is as a tool. And the problem becomes they try to make it so you have to use them as a machine and you don't want to. And so you get stuck with I mean, nothing can get you more frustrated than, or you want something to just be a tool, just to do one thing. I want to hammer a nail, but this thing is so complicated, it doesn't even let me hammer a nail. That's what we're talking about. And what we're saying is that artificial intelligence is being called everything. I mean, I even heard a journalist today refer to AI when really what they were talking about was tech companies. And it caught me so off guard. They were saying, well, AI is taking over this and they're doing this. And I'm thinking, what is she, what, and what they meant was in this discussion, they were meaning tech companies. They weren't really even meaning just AI companies. They were talking about tech companies in general. So look, it's being perverted in a lot of ways, but the home point we're trying to say is that these things are really designed to be machines. Honestly, they're designed to be machines. They're not designed to be tools. And if you think about Google search, what's the difference between doing an inquiry of a in a sophisticated way of let's just use ChatGPT versus doing that same inquiry in just raw Google, not Google extended with Gemini, but just raw Google. Well, the difference is one is a tool. You point it in a direction and it'll just give you everything that's related to that thing in some form of hierarchy. Where the other will try to presume certain things and can give you as complete or as deep or as broad as you ask the question, and it goes off and does it for you. So that is the distinction, and it's really important that you understand that because just because you might be implementing a bunch of agents in your business doesn't mean they're functioning like machines, and it doesn't mean you're using the full capabilities of whatever is there to be used. So understanding this distinction is good, but just use it if somebody, hopefully in your case, you're not the one being called that. You're actually the one calling somebody that, right? So, but if you need, just think about that, the distinction between when you use that verbally to someone to describe someone, that's what you mean. And that's the same way here. But that's the distinction we're talking about. And so it's not really much more complicated than that. The only problem is, as we'll just unlayer here, there are a lot of aspects to a machine that don't exist in tools. So if you're using something that really could be done by a tool, you really kind of want to use a tool. You don't want to use AI because it will give you everything else at the same time. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you because you'll probably raise the level of sophistication of the dialogue here by turning it back over to you.
Um, no, I think that was very good clarification. I do want to make one comment about your journalist misusing the term AI. One of the things, and you and I have talked about this, Tom, there is so much hype and chatter
Mhm.
in this whole field related to AI that you have to be very careful about the terminology you use. This is actually one of the reasons why we're spending time to dig deeply into the three topics here to try to clarify what's going on here, because you'll find that people just are chattering away about the use of AI generally, meaning anything from heaven knows what up until till the most sophisticated uses of generative AI models without making any distinctions between the various possibilities in between. So you really have to be careful about the terminology. Let me jump right into an example here. AI agents. Now, you and I have been talking about AI agents. We've done a couple of podcasts on them. And we think actually that a single AI agent is a tool. It accomplishes one function. You put it in a place, you expect it to do something, and that's it. Now, agents can be accumulated into what's being called an AI agent architecture, where a number of agents combine to perform a whole process or to order something, do the various steps in an ordering process or something. That's a machine. That's more machine-like because you have to take the care to make sure that the machine is pointed in the right direction, that it's coordinating the use of the individual agents, and that it's coming up with something that can't be done just in one single step. So that's another way to think about a distinction here. We think that one single AI agent is a tool, but when you combine agents in an architecture, then you have a machine that can accomplish a lot of things.
There, Deirdre, one of the distinctions that could might help somebody is that when an AI agent functions like a tool, it's almost like a power tool as opposed to a manual tool. So, because it automates certain things and it automates small elements of a process. For example, well, I don't need to give an example, but power tools don't just make it easier to do something. They also can perform an element of minor automation. Now, when this is something that I've seen even recently, I spent time with somebody the other day who was struggling with using Claude because what happened is they got way too deep, way too fast, and they lost complete control because it is a machine. And what they were trying to do was set up a set of agents that would do discrete tasks, but they didn't understand that it's their job to map the architecture or have an or have that be a task that they do first, right? And so what happened is without the architecture and documenting it and making sure that they reverse engineered the process, you can end up with a mess. And Andrei Karpathy wrote didn't write, somebody else wrote it, but there's something called Claude MD, which is a set of instructions. I know you know this. A set of instructions. There are four different ones of the instructions, and it's more complicated than what I'm describing. But fundamentally, he was laying out, and he was doing this verbally. Someone else captured it and put it into this set of prompts, which is really how you direct AIs, machines, LLMs, I should say, today. And it what it one of those prompts is to make sure the process is as simple as possible. And then the other one, so I'm giving you two of the four. The other one is that it's goal directed. Everything is goal directed. Now, what this translates to somebody who's trying to write an architecture, as you were just describing, an agent architecture or agentic architecture, is that the the preferred way to do this is the way we've talked about. Set the objective. What's the end result you want? Then reverse engineer the process into as simple as possible. And then once you've done that, then begin to figure out how do you create this architecture of tools, power tools that can actually do this? And how much oversight do you want in that? Do you want it to just start and go to the end? Or is it better if you put some interrupts in there to look at what the progress of the work is before you go? These are all the things that to be able to do this well, this architecture can be incredibly powerful. And so we're not demeaning the fact that it can be converted from tools into a machine. But just remember, there are two things going on here. It has that capability, and so it can do a lot more. And because of the architecture, the way these models work is they're trying to satisfy you. So they're trying to anticipate what you want. So their desire is to do more. And you have to find some way to constrain it to only do what you want it to do. So we're adding a lot of complexity into how you manage these things. But otherwise, you end up like this poor fellow who just said, oh my gosh, a really bright fellow that runs his own business, and he and his family do, and it's a wine business and all this. They just got caught up in an incredibly complex mess that was created, unfortunately, by the LLM that was trying to solve his problem. So the reason I'm using this example of this is that that tools that are manual tools can be incredibly powerful. They can be even more powerful when they're, let's say, power tools. And that what these tools can do is be strung together in this agentic architecture to be able to execute in machine-like ways where one thing triggers another to trigger another to trigger another. But when you're doing this, you're running a process, and it's really important to try to lay out that architecture and then decide when do you want to, if you want to interrupt and make sure that it's headed in the direction you want. So I know we're describing complexity here, but this is what you're paying for, right? And we'll get into costs later, but you can almost anticipate what I'm going to tell you is that you're paying for the ability to let it be a machine. And so we'll talk about that later on in usage and choosing the right um, capability to use to do what you want to achieve. But I think in all this, Deirdre, it's not only just to understand, okay, what's the difference between somebody that's a tool and somebody that's a machine, right? And then secondly, how can you use them effectively to do what you want to do? And that is almost always going to be a process that's goal defined that needs to be pared down to its bare minimum, usually through a really careful reverse engineering. Okay, so I know you've got some dust floating around over there, so you want to make sure that you're actually live on your mic. So you may want to unmute yourself.
Okay. Um, Even given what you've just said, Tom, most of the uses of these generative AI models, which can be powerful machines, frankly, it's been tool use. People use them for advanced search or to draft a document, possibly to combine two documents, or maybe just to have a chat with. That's a tool, just chatting with one of these models. This usage is aimed more at productivity and simple responses. It's useful, it's fun. It can be fun. But most uses don't go beyond this simple functionality. The same is true in businesses. Most businesses may not be aware that a number of I saw the figure that something like 40% of employees and businesses admit to using AI models. My bet is it's all search. It's all drafting documents. A few people might be doing other things, but it's still at the level of tool use. And certainly, given the push in the business media right now, people are starting to figure out how to use these AI agent things. Businesses feel they have to do what the business media is pushing because they get questions
Yeah, and I
about it.
think Deirdre here too, when we say this, we're not denigrating tools. Right? You would never want to try to hammer in a nail without a good hammer, right? Or pound in a nail without a good hammer because it just isn't effective. So it's not that these things are not effective at what they do. It's just understanding what are you using and why are you using it. So when we say somebody that, they're probably using it as a tool, I have a very sophisticated Claude skill that is just an agent, and it does an incredibly sophisticated job for me. But as you know, Deirdre, it didn't do spell check, right? So, you just can't make up what happens when you do this. What are you really doing? And sometimes a simple manual hammer is a better choice than a power hammer, right? So I don't mean to interrupt you too much here,
No,
Deirdre,
no,
but
no, 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 no,
these
no. I think this is
examples are
very
real, right?
it's an important concept because we keep trying. In fact, we've been talking for 6 months now. We've been producing podcasts for 6 months, trying to get people to understand that these generative AI models are indeed machines and can be used to do complex work that provides value. Not that it does the work for you, but that it complements you as a human in a human machine partnership to come out with something that's better than it would be if you just tried to do it yourself. And I made a list of some of the topics we've been covering in our podcasts, and listeners can go back to some of our podcasts and see that. We've shown how to analyze a marketplace, identify and analyze competition, set out customer profiles, do a comparative analysis of products. Knows X better than Y. Identify marketplace gaps and new opportunities. That's actually a big one. Develop a strategic initiative in response to prompts. Build a strategy and execution plan. Gather information to support a decision. Now, it's important for me to point out that I'm saying that the machine can do this. It's not that it does this. I mean that it works with humans to facilitate the work on these topics. It's not that you press a button and out comes a strategy or out comes a marketplace analysis. You have to do a lot of the work of setting a context and creating strings of intelligent prompts so that you can get out of the machine what you want to. And
And Deirdre, on that point, you and I've seen plenty of times when people have done that. Somebody says, "Give me a business case on a subject," and it will do it, but what you get is nowhere near what you need because it lacks real leadership on your part because you haven't defined well enough a context. You haven't added your own judgment and your own set of your own value add into the equation. And then you haven't added any of your experience into it. And so what happens is you get something and it looks wonderful and it looks really impressive, but it's hollow because it lacks that combination. And, we have both seen in the work that we've done, when you can get both together, you can get a really good result way faster than you ever could if you didn't employ, just like you can when you use good tools. What this does is it has the ability to do many pieces of what used to be you had to employ a bunch of different tools to do or have other people do. So the really important message here we're sending is, yes, can someone say, yeah, put a business plan together for me? And you'll get exactly what it'll be if you just hand it to somebody who's not very knowledgeable about the space and tell them to go do it and don't give them any guidance. You'll get something back, but it surely won't be at the level of value that you should be demanding. Let me say it that way. And that's the real issue. So it's not that we're denigrating that yes, it's really powerful and it can be very helpful if you provide your contribution as the human and what you bring, which is judgment, experience, and context to this. And if you're lucky enough, as you said today, wisdom, right? So, but that usually comes with time, Deirdre, if ever. Some of us tools don't have too much wisdom in us.
Mhm. And that's one of the points to take away from this podcast, that the machine-like capabilities of these AI models come about only when
Yeah.
there's a human driving the machine. So let's give an example here. Let's say you want to get in a car and drive to some place. You can use the machine properly to get to your destination, or you can just not pay attention, do other things, and you'll wind up in a ditch or driving into a wall or getting lost somewhere. So you have to use the machine properly to get what you want. Another analogy, which we've talked about in a car, is that speed control is a tool. Speed control, and you click the lever, speed control is on. Self-driving in a car is a machine.
Yes.
And you know
Yes.
this very well, Tom, as a Tesla owner there. So it's a different level of intention about what you're doing. And then you spend a lot of time getting your Tesla right.
Yeah.
So it will go to the destination, drive the way you want it, follow all of your rules for driving and so forth. But then when you've provided that input, it does what you want as the machine you want. So, So, very generally, I guess we can say that when users use these models as machines in their full capacity, leaders can get out of them driving activity, creating new functionality and pathways, and very importantly, building the business's data and information capabilities. This is something that we don't hear talk about that much. You and I talk about it because we think this is one of the most important ways these machines can be worked. But we don't necessarily hear, say, journalists or others talking about it. And that's because I think you and I feel that others are talking about tools, not as machines. Anyway, but we've talked a lot in our past few videos about how a well-driven machine can work to gather information across an organization.
Yeah.
Most people work vertically in a function in an organization, and they'll make excuses like, oh, I can't talk about that because so and so over an X function won't give me the information. Well, the machine can get out there. And if the processes are in place, and we'll talk about that in a while, get out there, gather the information from across the different functions, create the ability to work horizontally across the functions, combining the data and information and ways of working and examples and capabilities, all of those good things that people wish they had from all of the functions in the organization. And then you can use that, and we call this the AI insight layer, which we'll get into more in our next podcast. Get the machine to tap into this layer to do analyses that help you. For example, do a marketplace analysis because your machine can go out and gather external information to combine with the internal information to provide a mix of internal and external information for everyone in the organization. And think about what that does in terms of raising the appropriateness of the people working in an organization to make the organization work more effectively in the marketplace externally. It's a tremendous capability here. And this is something that we encourage people to think about. And again, we'll talk more about this. And we talk about this as using the machine to change the substance of work. No longer just vertical, it's horizontal. You're no longer just a functional expert. You know how to work fluently with these AI models to get out of all of the information you need to enhance your own work and deliver better work for the organization.
Now,
You
Deirdre, you're
can,
not saying if you want to convert yourself from being a tool to a machine, you have to say that you have to do both, you have to look both ways, right? I mean, I know I'm making a joke about this, but it's really serious that functionally, think functionally is like hitting with a hammer. It's like it's what basically it's a tool, but you've also got this flow. And when we say somebody's a machine, what we're saying is they flow. They put all these activities together and it go. And when we say that this is something that these things do really well, is this flow work, this machine work. Why do they do them well? Well, here's the real trick. They're predictive, but they are not deterministic, right? And so what we'll tell you eventually, and we'll get when we get into the AI insight layer, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but you want to make sure you're using the right method for the right job, right? That this horizontal work of the machine doesn't work well unless the tools are working well, right? And that's why we've said all along, because one of the questions we get is, why is it 50-50? Why do you say, well, everybody's going to have to learn how to be at least have half of their work as tool-like, is functional expertise, making sure the numbers work, the systems work. And then, only then can the flow work. And that's the case. Self-driving only works when every part of it works well. and is with precision. So the GPS works right. The mechanism to power it works. Even the tires are sound, right? And at appropriate repair and inflation. So we don't minimize that you need both to be able to function. But the point is that what is really good about AI models is functioning as machines, not as tools. That's not how they're designed. And it's important to realize that. And then when we say that you're using a machine-like capability to do tool-like work, the reason why agents were created was to make it more tool-like. So you could implement it easier than trying to implement a machine. Also, it can be more controlled that way. And that was another aspect was how can you control its use? Well, just narrow down what it does and then stick it in there. But if you're really smart, you'll know that it has this ability to do more. So you can enable that if you want. But if you're like me and you do all this other sophisticated stuff, but in the end you don't do spell check, well, okay. So these are all these subtleties. The other thing that I would say in here, and the question that we do get asked at times is why, when you all are people that build companies, why do we always talk about AI? Well, we're talking about it because it is the biggest disruptor in our industry right now. It would be like we were 20 years ago that many of you didn't live through. But when the really serious internet came about and people started, it would be like talking about building a business without figuring out how does the internet play into building your business. Same thing here. It's going to be very hard to be a leader, we think, even today, without being deep into this stuff. And so that's why we're spending so much time. Now, if you want to get into how do you use it as a leader, that's what we're doing in our books. You're doing it in the position papers. And then we'll be doing more podcasts on that as we go down the route here. But one of the reasons why we're spending so much time on these is because these things that we're talking about are not common. They haven't been here for 50 years or 100 years. They're coming about because of a disruption in the marketplace created by this age of intelligence, this age of capabilities that are, I would say, I hate to make this analogy, but they're more machine-like than they are tool-like. So self-driving, for example, which would be hard to envision how to make that happen 20 years ago. You could envision making pieces of it. Remember, we had GPSs, but remember what happened with the GPSs. And you made this example, Deirdre. There were people that literally followed what the GPS said, and they drove themselves off of, streets that didn't exist to bad end results. Fortunately, not very often. I don't, if my memory serves, but it was still without that human judgment in there of allowing the machine to go beyond its capability, which is your judgment. That's when you get yourself in trouble. So this is why we say it's great to narrow it down to tool use, but make sure you put in those judgment points to be able to apply the human judgment. It's like following the old GPSs with no human intervention. Um, and it's what in self-driving has had to be proven with millions and millions of miles of no human intervention to prove that it doesn't do the kinds of things that would have you driving off a road that doesn't exist, for example. So we're adding a lot of complexity into this concept of this, but this is what you have to understand this base level of how is this stuff really functioning in the environment to be able to really get a clear picture of this. This is why we say when you ever have these disruptions like this, you have to be a user. This is the essence of it. I mean, if Deirdre, if you weren't a user, if I weren't a user, these podcasts would have very little value. because we would be like pretty much everybody else that's talking about this at a high level without really truly understanding all the aspects to it. So that's my little rant on the point about the difference between the application of it and when human intervention has to apply.
But it's all very important information. Bringing in another term to make it clear to people what we're talking about. You and I have used the term up your game, that everyone has to up their game in order to operate in this new um, work world that's being created. If you stay working in a function only vertically, and not up, you're not upping your game, and you're not going to be in the flow of how work gets done in an organization. You'll be underperforming. And that's not a good position really to be in these days. Businesses are looking for the people who can start to work with the emerging technologies to yield more results for the organization in the marketplace. And frankly, Tom, the complexity of the marketplace and the business world make this all necessary. The business world is not the way it was even just 20 years ago. We've got just a whole new business world out there. The stakes are higher. You need more information. You need people working with information. You need to move quickly. You need to spot opportunities quickly and be able to harness your resources quickly. And these are the sorts of capabilities that the machine can give you. And let us assure you that if you're not doing this, your competitors are. And I'm going to talk for just a minute or two about this because, people, it's almost turning into who gets it and who doesn't get it. That there are new competitors out there all the time. And it's not just, oh, B company down the hill. It's new ways of meeting consumer needs. And it's not just through companies, it's through processes, through different types of ways that people can accomplish things. If you don't get a full sense of your range of competition out there, companies, methods, processes, and anything else that could be out there, you're putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage. The world is moving too fast for you not to be using the machine at your fingertips to make sure you stay on top of the competition out there because your competitors will be staying on top of what you're doing. And I said it's not just entities and processes, it's also national and political emphases. Think of what's happening right now with embargoes out there, or what people are doing to get their energy needs filled with difficulties in the Middle East and so forth. It's what competitors are stepping up and making things work. Who's out there wringing their hands and just falling apart at this time? You need to be on top of this because this could be an opportunity for your business. Um, so it's there are so many ways to say it. It's the same thing that the world is getting so complex right now that you need to use every means at your hands to understand what's happening. And some executives are spending time every morning, first thing, with a Claude or a Grok or another model to just say, what's happening out there? What do I need to know? And here are the questions I have for you. Any changes in this, any changes of that? And that just keeps you prepared for what the world is throwing at you today. And with that point, Tom, maybe it's a time to disappoint our listeners further and talk about costs. So
Oh,
over
yeah.
to you to talk about costs.
The issue here is one of you're paying for this highly sophisticated predictive capability that is really good at collecting, absorbing, and synthesizing, meaning making sense of a lot of disparate material. And then through its ability to take and be goal oriented, which it is essentially, to make sure that you've maneuvered the model in such a way that it'll give you a really good answer. But if you're using that as a tool, you're paying for all of that other capability. And this is where there's a mismatch. I've seen some articles. A friend of ours wrote an article recently, a really good one, about the cost issue that's starting to really bother CFOs in industry. And I know it's the case because every industry that I'm talking to tells me about how cost is an issue and that they're looking at how can they throttle back their use of these models because the costs are so high. Well, the reason the costs are so high are a couple of things. Usually, the biggest one is not the use, it's the model you're using or the capability you're using to do the work, such as some of these models have uh, they have various levels of sophistication that you can choose based on what you're doing. And the natural inclination we all have is I'm going to use the most powerful one, the most recent one, the most sophisticated one. Well, I'll tell you, some of these models and using that capability will chew up your usage and send your bill sky high. The question you have to ask yourself is, can I do it with the lowest functional model that is in existence there? I have to tell you, 9 times out of the 10 times, whatever I do, I can do it with the lowest level model that is existent in that capability. So whether it's Grok or Claude or whatever, I can be the lowest level model and it'll do it fine. I may have to wait 5 seconds instead of a half a second, but do I care? Does it really matter to me when I'm doing a piece of complex work? Not really, not for what I'm doing, depending on what you need. And if you need that speed, you probably need to have it in-house anyway, and you probably should figure out how to make it less cost burden to you. But I will tell you, I only ran, and just this happened yesterday. I don't think I mentioned to you. I was doing a piece of research, and I ended up having to use the most sophisticated Grok model that they had because it was choking on the lower. You and I've done some of that work before, where it just choked on it, and I had to use the most. So now I got it done, and even that took a while, but I'm sure it chewed up a lot of my capability. And what's happening is you're using a lot of resources. You're generating a lot of heat. You're taking a lot of electricity, which is the reason why you're generating heat. Um, and you're doing a lot of work. So just the biggest issue here, I think, in this world is you're overusing, or better said, not overusing. You're choosing to use a tool that you don't need. And it's really important. So the question becomes even searching, and I know you do this, but I'm very careful to know when am I going to use just a pure internet search versus use a model versus use one where I've provided enormous context. That has a lot to do with what kind of an answer do I want? And and do I need just a simple answer? Is it really more deterministic, meaning it's more uh, 2 + 2 = 4? Either I spell it right or I don't. Is it really that? Or am I using it properly in this phrase, in this paragraph, inside the book, and the rules I use for writing the book that I've established for myself, how I want to write, and then have it come back and say, did you write that way? And say, no, there are 5 or 6 examples of where you didn't write it that way. Okay, well, then I have to go back and do it. That's a way more complex task where an LLM fits that versus this over here of just saying, did I spell the word right? So selecting the right tool matters, and it matters a lot. I mean, you can go from paying $30 a month for yourself for what you do versus $100 a month and still run into problems. So you're talking about massive differences, and this is just an individual use. This isn't really saying an enterprise use of it or an engineering shop that may be part of what you're doing. And the point that you're making, Deirdre, about about where you skimp and where you don't. It's really important to know by function what kind of sophisticated work are you doing and what models fit that usage. And that making sure that they're using it in a way that is the productive way that you're talking about. So you need not only people that supply that capability, but people that also know how to manage that capability, manage the work process, and actually the selection of the capability to execute that. That's the only way you're going to end up with managing costs. I will tell you when you get in the world of engineering, figuring out how to use these capabilities there, you need really, really switched on people that know how to do this because there are way too many examples I've seen. One that one of our colleagues mentioned to me the other day, which is very difficult. It's a difficult problem to solve. And so, yes, can it do something? But then the question is, and this was the fundamental question, yes, it can do it. Yeah, it'll do something that hasn't been able to be done in the past easily or in any kind of a good cost model, mostly because of time. But then the question is, once you've done that and you've expended that capability and that cost, will the market pay for it? And that trade-off, this gets into the point we make about cost is really important, but it's also relative to the value you're getting back from the marketplace. What will the market do to reward you for having expended that? And that's what you have to make sure you're paying attention to. And we founded almost all the things we do, we talk about the value exchange, the exchange you're making with the marketplace to receive some form of value back that matches or hopefully you're intending to exceed the value that you're providing the marketplace. And that's both hard and soft values in coming back and giving and coming back. And making sure that you're checking that, and it becomes even more important now with this cost issue, is when you're headed down that path to make sure that will the market reward me? And do I have a process to make sure it will, or a process to make sure that I know if it is or isn't? That's always the problem. And this is the problem that most people are highlighting now. I didn't know it was going to cost me that much. And now I realize I'm way out of balance with what the marketplace will return to me. So it's not a case of whether you should do it or not. It's a case of will the market reward you for what you expect back for that? That's really the question that you have to ask. So I would say it's more about selecting the right capability to solve the problem you've got. Is it tool-like or is it more of a machine-like? And then am I using the right machine level capability to do this? And then that you've got the value exchange measurement that you're at least being able to estimate, worst case, of how you're doing in that value exchange that you should be always looking at because these are expensive propositions. I mean, even the difference between spending $20 or $30 a month versus 1,000 a month, I mean, 100 a month, is a big deal for anybody. And so extrapolate that to what a business would pay, and especially if you're in engineering. So that's really the issue of cost, Deirdre. It's around the selection of capability, whether it's tool or machine-like, selection of that capability, and then within that, how powerful a power tool do I need to do that? Do I need to drill a hole, or do I need to get an excavator in here and dig a big hole, right? And then the question is, and at the same time, am I measuring back what the marketplace will give me for that hole I just dug or the drill hole I just made? So that is the big rub that we're seeing today in the marketplace. And we think it's hard to judge that if you don't have this value exchange aspect in how you're evaluating it.
Mhm. You're pointing to the need for leaders to understand the technology, Tom, to understand from a strategic point of view what you need to accomplish and what tools you need to accomplish so you can execute your strategy and meet your goals. Has always been an issue for leaders, but it becomes more intense when you're talking about these advanced machines because you have such capabilities, but can you afford it? Is the use of these machines in your organization dedicated in the right way? Are all of your employees using the machines in the right way to further the goals of the organization, or are they just frittering away usage? I mean, this is why you can't simply let people download these AI models and say, go to, and not be surprised by getting a big bill at a certain point or not seeing enough return from this. And that's one thing that you and I talk about a lot. This requires a real mindset shift and confirmation from leaders where they understand, confirm the use of the tools, but then shift their mindsets to understand how the tools are used and what they have to do to build an organization that uses these models, whether as tools or as machines, in an appropriate way to get, and here's a tool-like term, but it can be used for machines as well, to get the leverage the machines, the organizations can get from this very, very powerful technology. And it is powerful technology, and when used appropriately, can create tremendous leverage for an organization, especially when you decide that you can take the tool from being a simple productivity tool into truly doing the machine-like work that provides great benefits for the organization. And again, from the organization point of view, leaders have to build the organization that does this, have the people on hand, have the culture on hand, have the training in place, have the processes in place, reinforce the need. And I stress it's a need, not just an ability, a need to get up out of your function and operating to take advantage of all of the information, internal and external, that these machines can deliver to you so you do a top level job. And it all comes down to understanding that you're not just downloading a new version of Word here, that you're downloading, or rather, probably getting access to through a subscription, a very powerful model that can create very powerful leverage when used in the appropriate ways to enhance your organization's productivity and performance in the marketplace. I don't know how else to put it, Tom. So
No, I think
I'll turn it
you've
over
said it
to
well.
you for
No, you've said it
final
well.
words here.
And
Okay.
this is why we say that there's huge opportunity here for anybody in this marketplace, no matter where you sit today. There is huge opportunity if you become someone who has the curiosity and the desire to learn, use, and think your way through these, because the use of these things is you're being able to use them effectively in the ways we talk about is a huge advantage to any organization. And the way that they can benefit a company is enormous, or any institution, or even yourself. You talk about having a machine brief you. I have it do brief me because I've set it up to ask a series of questions automatically of the marketplace, of everything else it's seeing, and give me a daily briefing, which it does, on what am I looking at for the day, and how is that going to affect against all the objectives I have, the monthly objectives, the weekly objectives, the annual objectives, strategic and operational. So meaning, and all the businesses we're involved in, and then me personally in dealing with them. This is stuff that you would have a hard time. What I'm left with it after we built this, what I'm left with is evaluating it, right? And redirecting it and saying, well, I can't really do that today. That needs to be done tomorrow, or just rethinking. And so this is where beauty of the work is. You're no longer drudgingly doing this, collecting all this stuff and putting it into a spreadsheet and trying to figure it all out. You're actually being given the higher level job. This is what we mean by it opens up opportunities for you to be able to do higher level work for yourself. So this is why we don't share the fact that there won't be good jobs for people out there in the near term. Maybe in the very, very long term, that you'll have to come up with what that job is. So ever more will you have to put more thought into how you contribute. Okay, fair point. Learn it now. So it won't be new to you when it becomes a larger part of your day is doing it that way, is influencing rather than doing. So with that, Deirdre, I'll let you take us home here.
I bet you thought when we started that this whole topic of machine versus tool was going to be a very simple one. It needed just a few definitions at the beginning. I think
Not
you're
with us involved, Deirdre.
not with us involved. There were reasons we talked about this, but now you understand that it all comes down to the best use, the appropriate use, the strategic use, understanding the capabilities, getting a cost-effective usage of your interaction with these tools by using them appropriately to get the best leverage in the marketplace, the best exchange in the marketplace. This is why leaders need to think through whether this is just a tool or a real machine here that can deliver great value for me. So we'll be saying more about this, I'm sure, going forward, Tom.
We
So
will. Deirdre, it's always a pleasure.
always a pleasure, Tom. So long for now.